Just help yourself, please. The other thing I want to say as the person chairing tonight's committee meeting is we're here to hear all voices. We will listen with care to what all the speakers are wishing to convey to us tonight, and I do seriously just ask of you in the same gracious way to listen later when we debate and discuss, and people will have views, and I want it to be a meeting where, as I say, all voices are reasonably heard, please. So it is now 6 o'clock and we're going to formally commence the planning meeting. It's a single application meeting, but first of all, are there any apologies that need to be recorded tonight, please, for absence?
Through you, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor Sue Burfoot, who is on jury service, and her substitute is Councillor Roger Shelley.
And are there any interests that any member wishes to declare in terms of the site application, anything that needs to be noted? So my next step is that with Sue Burfoot being away on jury service, I'd like to propose from the chair that we elect Councillor Peter Dobbs to be Vice Chairman tonight. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Murphy, thank you. All those in favour, please show. And that does appear to be unanimous. So I appreciate your help tonight, Peter. That takes us then nicely, immediately to public participation. And can I thank all the people that are coming tonight? This is what it's really all about, listening and appreciating the comments from people who have taken the time to put whatever it is you're going to say to us. So I'm going to invite Councillor David Chapman, who is representing my own town council, that is Darley-Dale Town Council. And David, you're going to speak, I understand, against the application. And you've got 3 minutes, David, and it's the switch to the right.
Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. The officer has recommended approval whilst openly acknowledging that this application breaches policy EC9, paragraph D, the requirement for tourism development to be within a safe, attractive 10-minute walk of regular public transport. The officer admits Farley Lane has no footways and is unsuitable for pedestrians. There's no accessible route for wheelchair users or pushchair users. Condition 25 requires physical improvements to pedestrian routes between this site and Matlock. Members should ask who's costed this. Has Derbyshire County Council Highways agreed to it because physical improvements to a public highway require highway authority agreement? Without that, this condition cannot be delivered. The officer also suggests that guests could walk to Matlock via a woodland path across Peat Moorland, a 3-kilometre route. Members should ask, has anybody assessed the cost and environmental impact of making a 3-kilometre of peat woodland path accessible to wheelchair users? Building a firm accessible path across waterlogged, unstable peat requires major engineering works. We believe that assessment has not been done, and those very works would damage the same peat habitat that this application is already under scrutiny for disturbing. So condition 25 is unachievable as written. An unachievable condition cannot lawfully make an unacceptable development acceptable. And what happens if the applicant agrees to the condition but then doesn't build the pathway? The condition should read that the development of the site doesn't start until the condition has been satisfied. Accessibility failure is not our only concern. Members are being asked to approve a major development on an incomplete evidence base. Severn Trent has confirmed in writing that foul water flows from this development have not been assessed cumulatively, alongside 343 planned new dwellings in the wider Matlock and Tansley area. The officer acknowledges this, yet approval is still recommended. The officer has acknowledged the policy conflicts. The evidence base is incomplete. The wildlife advisors object. Refusal is the only appropriate decision today. Finally, The petition against this application now contains over 6,000 signatures, which exceeds the population of Darley-Dale. And on the 18th of June, this council formally adopted a recommendation to give greater weight to the voice of local residents. Today, councillors, is your first opportunity to test that resolve. Darley-Dale Town Council asks members to refuse this application.
Councillor Chapman, can I just thank you for speaking in time? That was excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I invite now Councillor James Wilson, again representing Darley-Dale Town Council. And James is going to speak against the application.
Good evening, everyone. I've provided some notes to this committee beforehand, and I hope that you've had the chance to look at them. The notes that I provided is information from the British Geological Survey, and they show the carbon in the soil on the site. This is data produced by a globally respected organisation. It shows that on the site, just in the topsoil, is almost 5,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide, and if developed, will be irreversibly released. The gentleman to my right will have you believe that this is a small, environmentally sustainable development. It isn't. At public consultation, the applicant admitted that no carbon footprint assessment had been calculated. They simply brushed it aside and said that they were B Corp certified, which is no more than virtue signalling, in my opinion. The officer reports that the timber used is FSC certified, but again, at public consultation, the applicant openly admitted that timber is sourced from as far away as Estonia and Canada. Not very environmentally friendly, in my opinion. And whilst we're on the topic of the officer, it's in my personal opinion that despite the overwhelming evidence to suggest that this application is completely inappropriate and unwanted, that they have gone some way to mislead the committee. What else could explain using terms like a pleasant 10-minute walk when talking about the treacherous journey to the nearest bus stop, or calling the site, calling the on-site roads made of crushed compacted limestone permeable? It's important to note that I could not find a single engineering reference to such a material being classed as permeable. So with that being said, I urge this committee to unanimously reject this application.
Thank you very much, James. Len Best of Matlock Town Council. Mr. Best, will you come please? And you're speaking against the application. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to thank the Council for allowing me to represent Matlock Town Council, and I trust the vast majority of Matlock residents. This application clearly has huge local opposition. Nearly, as we've just heard, nearly 6,500 signatories on the petition. The planning portal also indicates in excess of 125 written objections from local residents. There have been objections from several organisations, including the Clean Rivers Trust, CPRE, the Ramblers, and a number of local businesses. So why so much opposition? Well, we shall be made aware, I'm sure, of the problems inherent in drainage, flooding and foul water disposal. The latter, which will obviously have consequences for contamination of groundwater. A major objection, of course, concerns the potential loss of an area important for the physical and mental well-being of local residents. This development, with resultant air, noise and light pollution, could not fail to overwhelm the peace, tranquility and public enjoyment of the area, and this would seem to be in contradiction of policy EC9 of council planning policy. We just heard earlier the problems with access. Due to the distance and topography, the site is not readily accessible from nearby settlements by foot or bicycle, again in contravention of policy EC9. In practice, the development would result in a great increase in traffic movements, cars, service vehicles and so on. A final point, there is already, as I'm sure everyone knows, most people know, an existing facility of this type at Darwin Forest, an established family-owned holiday park within a mile or so of the proposed site. And I understand, like many local hospitality businesses, that Darwin Forest already struggles to attract staff at the required level. So any further development would produce effectively no net gain in local employment. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, the proposed development would clearly be to the great detriment of Matlock Town, with, despite assertions from Forestry England, no benefits to the local population. We therefore respectfully ask the Council to refuse this application outright.
Len, thank you very much indeed. Where is he? District Councillor Steve Wayne. Where are you hiding, Steve? He's outside. Steve, it's your turn.
Chair, before I begin my own submission, may I ask permission to read a short statement from David Ball? Mr. Ball is unable to attend this evening but has submitted 2 comprehensive documents relevant to this application.
Yes, that's fine.
And also
Yeah.
Mr. Ball holds a degree in landscape architecture, and as you may be aware from findings from the Walls inquiry, the information he supplied on the drainage proves a tipping point. So if I could start now, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ball writes, this application fundamentally misunderstands the hydrology of Farley Moor. The two comprehensive geomorphological studies of Farley Moor were undertaken by geographer B.T. Bunting in the 1960s. Bunting's surveys show that the water rapidly translocates from the Black Brook to the north through subsurface conduits towards the headwater of the Bentley Brook immediately to the southeast. Bunting's soil studies show the site contains peat and deep over-degenerated soils, which act as an essential holding ground, slowing overland flow and subsurface transmission. The proposed development requires the redistribution of thousands of tonnes of peat and soil and the removal of 1,300 trees. The resulting loss of trees and the holding ground, combined with the introduction of impermeable surfacing, will substantially increase surface water runoff. To address this, the developer proposes swales, infiltration trenches and soakaways. These interventions will accelerate groundwater movement into the Chatsworth Grit aquifer. The consequence is clear. The proposal will materially and permanently alter the drainage regime on Farley Moor, increasing both the speed and volume of the water entering the Bentley Brook, a highly sensitive catchment and already prone to flooding. And I can be a witness to that because I'm the local flood warden. That's Mr. Ball's submission, Chair.
Okay, you've got 3 minutes now, Steve.
Thank you. I'll bat on then. Chair, members of the committee, I personally object to this application because the evidence before you is plainly insufficient to demonstrate that the development is acceptable and deliverable. My concerns relate directly to the planning, policy compliance and where the critical impacts have been properly assessed. Sewer network capacity. Severn Trent Water has confirmed to me, through a freedom of information, that foul flows from the development would enter the Sandy Lane connection and pass through the already constrained Lumsdale network and then on to Matlock Green combined sewer outflow. They confirmed that this development was not included in their recent cumulative sewer capacity model for the 343 homes mentioned by the Darley-Dale councillor. Its impact has not been assessed. The Webster's Terrace overflow is not part of their current modelling work in the Matlock area. Despite this, members, you are being asked to accept that would be no material impact, and that assertion is unsupported. The issue is not whether these lodges alone overload the system, it is whether there is any credible evidence that additional flows will not worsen an already surcharging network. Without a hydraulic assessment, that includes the development, approval cannot be considered robust or compliant, and not with that is the policies PD8, PD9. Highways and accessibility. The proposed condition requiring vehicles to turn right when leaving the site is not enforceable. Visitors will take the shortest route down Farley Hill, regardless of signage. Members must ask whether this condition genuinely addresses the County Council's road safety concerns. Planning conditions must be necessary, enforceable and effective. This one is none of those. The pedestrian route to Matlock is challenging, steep and unsuitable for many users. There is no assessment of accessibility for disabled people. If the route is via Bent Lane, it is also going through an ancient oak wood. The proposed site is remote to shops, and this is contrary to shops, services and transport. This is contrary to policy EC9. The council has refused on many occasions single holiday lets for being unsustainable. Tonight we're assessing 75. Visitors will rely on vehicles. Fire risk. Any of you councillors, whilst you were up there on the site visit today, were concerned about the fire risk on that site associated with the fact that the site is proposed to have just one single track access and egress. I've concerns, particularly by the lack of a meaningful comment from Derbyshire Fire Service. Reliance and conditions. This recommendation seeks to defer multiple fundamental matters to conditions: sewer capacity, highway safety, pedestrian accessibility, emergency access, wildfires, resilience and wider environmental impact. These are not minor technical details. These are core determinants of whether the development is sustainable and deliverable without unacceptable harm. Deferring fundamental assessments to post-approval conditions is surely contrary to established planning practice and creates a clear risk of permission being judged unsound or unlawful in the future.
Steve, you've gone well over time now.
Have I?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and thank you, Chair, for letting me speak.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you, Steve. So our first speaker tonight from the Save Farley Moor campaign is Jim Dixon, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jim Dixon. I'm a local resident of Darley-Dale. In over 30 years of engagement with the planning system, I can think of few developments that are as unpopular as this. When we first established Save Farley Moor, I had little idea how much support and passion for these woods there would be in the community, and I would encourage the councillors to turn round and look at the public that you're serving. Despite your officer recommendation to approve, I strongly believe you should turn this application down. Your officers have put too much weight on the assertions by the applicant that when scrutinised, those assertions undermine your policies for sustainable tourism, the economy, community and nature conservation. Councillors, think of the Wolds, where the community resisted the wrong kind of development in the wrong place. And your planning officers put insufficient weight on the views of residents and experts. The scale of the development is wholly out of keeping with a small area of forest. Farley Moor is part of Matlock Forest, which is markedly smaller than the other sites where Forest Holidays operate. It's much easier to site a lodge village in the 10,500 hectares of Forest of Dean than it is in the few dozen acres and hectares of Matlock Forest. This is a small site where impacts are proportionately greater. The scale of the development, with 75 lodges and all the stuff that goes with that, is too great for a small site. To put this in context, Forest Holidays propose lodge side and additional car parking for over 249 cars. That's more than the main car park at the railway station in Matlock Town Centre. By shoehorning such a large development into a small site, there are numerous impacts on wildlife, the environment, local recreation users and businesses, and you'll hear more about this tonight from the people here. The only way that your officers can see this development can be approved is by the application of over 100 conditions, summarised not completely comprehensively into 29 in your officer's report. Many of these are complex, demanding, uncertain and very costly. How will these be costed and monitored? How will the council be able to keep Forest Holidays to their long-term commitments? This is a company which, according to its own accounts, is in some financial difficulty at the moment. Everybody in this sector is in financial difficulty at the moment. How can the funds be found to meet these conditions? The only option is to turn this development down. It's a development that fundamentally conflicts with your policies, and your officer's analysis leans too much to the vague assertions of the applicant. Listen instead to the local experts, the councils, the councillors, the community, and the people who know the site. When exposed to proper scrutiny, there remains huge questions that conditions can only partially resolve. A refusal is the only route to you.
Thank you, John. You're well over time.
Okay, I urge the council to turn this application down. Thank you.
I do apologise, Mark. I was asking, how do you pronounce your surname? Is it Eddowes? Yeah, Eddowes. Right, Mark, it's your turn, and you're representing the Farley Moor campaign.
Yes. Yeah.
Over to you then, sir.
Yeah. So I'm an ornithological research scientist with first-hand knowledge of the application side. Since moving to Derbyshire Dales from the High Peak in 2014, I've been visiting regularly because of the rich bird life to be found there. The rich bird life is an indicator of the high quality of the wider ecosystem at Farley Moor, and that valuable ecosystem would be harmed by the proposed development, by both direct habitat loss and increased human disturbance. The applicant's submission recognised some ecological value at the site and the need for compensatory measures to address the harm to it. However, the applicant's claims of mitigation and biodiversity net gain are based on inappropriate assumptions. The BNG assessment understates the current biodiversity value of the site and overstates the improvements that might be achieved by mitigation. The net gain that the applicant claims is quite simply unachievable in practice, given the high current value of areas that will be lost and the limited scope for real improvements elsewhere. In my view, following on from maybe what Jim was saying, the planning officers, other people have said, the planning officers' report presents a one-sided and misleading account of the proposal's ecological impacts, unrepresentative of the evidence before the LPA. Most importantly, it misrepresents the objection of the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, first identifying the DWT position as comments, suggesting that the DWT have commented only and are supportive of the proposed mitigation measures. In truth, they initially issued a holding objection and, after considering the mitigation proposed by the applicant, have recently confirmed that they maintain their objection. The officer's report doesn't make this at all clear. It quotes the DWT as saying that the proposed mitigation is reasonable. Well, yes, it is reasonable. It's essential to have some mitigation, but the DWT's position is that the mitigation is quite simply not sufficient, and they've maintained their objection. Approval of the application based on a misrepresentation of the consultation response of the DWT and other objections in respect of ecology would, I believe, make the decision open to legal challenge. I therefore suggest that the application should either be refused or otherwise the decision should be deferred until the errors and omissions in the officer's report have been corrected, so that a decision can be made based on the full evidence that has been put before the LPA.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. So we next have Professor Harvey Wood from the Save the Farley Moor campaign. Professor Wood, I think this is the first time I've had a professor at a planning meeting, so So you've got 3 minutes, Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to address this committee. I'm Professor Harvey Wood. I'm Director of Clean Rivers Trust. Clean Rivers Trust was founded in 1990, so we've been around a fair amount of time. I've been involved with water pollution now for over 40 years. I've studied the hydrogeology of the area of the moor and the village of Farley in Derbyshire in some detail in the early 2000s, when local residents were interested to find out where their water came from, because several houses rely on well supply rather than mains. What I need to say regarding the proposed forest holidays development relate to two concerns. One, if surface and storm water drainage is to enter the groundwater via soakaways, this would impact properties sited below Farley Moor, and particularly those properties that take their potable supply from wells below the moor. Firstly, the increased head of water that could develop within the groundwater may give rise to new springs. A new spring line could develop, which would cancelling the present spring line which supplies the properties. Worrying, this new spring line would threaten all properties below the moor, with possible flooding, as there are no drainage systems in place to manage such an eventuality. Even though the site is stated in the planning application to be linked to a main sewer, there needs to be an acceptance of leakage from such sewer pipeworks located in the forestry. This is common, an event that takes place regularly with trees. This would cause pollution to reach the wells below the moor and would require the Environmental Health Department of the Council to have to take action at some point. To keep this short, I will ask the Council to
Professor Wood, I ask you to conclude because you've exceeded your time.
refuse.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So I call upon Mark Cunningham, please, again from the Save the Farley Moor campaign group. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Good evening. My name's Mark Cunningham. I'm a local resident. I have an MSc in Pollution and Environmental Control, and I worked for the Environment Agency for 25 years. I'm speaking on behalf of Save Farley Moor, also covering some drainage issues. Farley Moor is sited on a hill with surface water runoff to Matlock Town and Dale. Woodland and peat pockets currently act as soakaways, especially important with severe rainfall events. Foul water discharged from the development would discharge down an already overloaded sewer network, as referenced in the recent Wolds inquiry. The Flood Risk Officer, David Ball, and Tweddle and Slater all identified drainage failings that have not been addressed. This contravenes planning policy. The drainage plans have several deficiencies. Foul water discharge from drain down days, cafe and cafe buildings have not been included. Forest holidays significant estimated discharge of 0.66 litres a second the true figure would be significantly higher. They haven't adequately addressed the concerns of the local flood authority, again a breach of planning policy. The proposed 3.25 kilometre long foul drainage pipe passes through an historic quarry, the Derwent Valley Aqueduct area and farmland to Sandy Lane, with no legal rights of access. No survey has been carried out on the route and the structural integrity of such a long pipe. With extreme pipe length, complex terrain, regulatory fees and pumping requirements for the connection to mains, water and sewer, this is likely to be a multi-million-pound investment. With 75 hot tubs, each holding approximately 1,600 litres, a conservative monthly changeover equates to 1.3 million litres of water a year for filling alone, in addition to water used by the restaurant, cabins and laundry. Farley Lane residential properties already have poor water pressure. Can Severn Trent Water guarantee this supply? Forest Holidays hot tubs use bromine sanitizer, which persists longer than chlorine, and oxidised bromine forms byproducts which are known to have an ecological concern. The applicant states that at times of inadequate drainage pipe capacity, this chemically treated water will be dispersed directly to the forest floor. This again is in contravention of planning policy. Finally, the cabin drainage design replaces gutters and downpipes with infiltration strips adjacent to the piling foundations. This does not comply with building regulations, which require a minimum 5 metre separation between soakaways and foundations. In conclusion, a 3.25 kilometre rising main sewer crossing land not owned by Forest Holidays is neither practical nor achievable. The development will overwhelm Matlock's already strange sewage and drainage systems and contravenes planning policy and building regulations. This proposal demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of this site. I respectfully urge the committee to refuse the application.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's the turn now of Mr. Vic Johnson, again representing the Save Farley Moor campaign. To provide some water really for the speakers, didn't they?
Do I need to do anything with this?
Yeah, it is on. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Victor Johnson. I'm a chartered engineer accredited to Euroeng status. I'm a member of the Institute of Physics, a fellow of the Institute of Measurement and Control, a membership of both the Institute of Gas Engineers and Energy Institute. My input is as a physicist applying physics to engineering, and I've been involved with gas emissions from various sources for over 50 years. Land such as the application acts as a soak, and it is indeed defined as a peat bog. It acts as a soak for carbon dioxide and retains it. This has been the case for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The land is nature's way of carbon capture. The land acts a bit like a sponge in water. The sponge retains water until disturbed and the water seeps out. When the ground is disturbed, as it will be if construction is allowed, conduits will result and carbon dioxide will be emitted to the atmosphere. The application has suggested that these emissions will be minimised by using steel supports for the sheds. They may also suggest that emissions may be so small as to be ignored. This opinion is nonsense. There is no accurate way to measure such emissions. Flow is not a direct physical measurement. It is implied by other measurements: velocity, pressure, friction coefficients, specific gravity, etc. of the gases, which are not known. Atmospheric pressure is critical in any calculation. As a physicist, I deal in facts, not in opinions. Once a conduit is there, the gases will escape. If the conduit is small, it will just take longer for the gases to escape. The National Planning Policy Framework appears to agree with these observations, and I am singularly surprised that both the applicant and the Planning Authority appear to have failed to follow this framework. Examples are paragraph 162. The planning system should take a proactive approach to mitigate and adapting to climate change. 163. The need to mitigate and adapt to climate change should also be considered in assessing planning applications, taking the full range of potential climate change impacts. Paragraph 164. New developments should be planned in ways that help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This includes the location. In short, I am of the opinion that this will contribute to global warming, contribute statutory emissions, contravene the Council Zone Zero emissions and any other zero aspirations. In short, I am of the opinion that anyone who supports this application cannot seriously subscribe to net zero, and therefore it must be refused.
Thank you very much, Pete. Sarah Benson, would you please, you're representing as well, Save Farley Moor campaign, and Sarah, you've got 3 minutes. Do you want any water, Sarah? You're right. John, can we get some water onto that table, please? And you've got, it's on, it's over there.
I know we're asking a lot for you to vote against an officer recommendation, but we're certain that we have enough to show you that this application should be turned down. Other councils, such as applications for Fine Shade and Mortimer Forest for forest holidays, did turn down for similar and lesser reasons. It is contrary to local planning policy. The cabins themselves are large and with the deck and car parking included take up a large footprint in the forest. Our campaigners visited the site at Delamere and we were quite shocked at the actual size of the cabins. Some of the lodges are 2-storey buildings, permanent houses with interior concrete floors. Instead of being temporary single-storey holiday lodges, as is required for sites in the Derbyshire Dales. Comparable developments such as Rivendale and Darwin Forest comply with building standards BSEN 1647 and BS 3632, ensuring single-storey, non-permanent sustainable structures. Approval here would set a worrying precedent for future applications and could lead to legal challenges to previous planning. Why the difference for forest holidays? As per the stated condition in the Planning Officer's report, if holiday use ceases for more than 3 years, all buildings must be removed and the land restored within 5 years. With a £125-year lease and Forest Holidays already running at a £12 million loss in their last filed accounts, will the significant decommissioning liability cost be forwarded and set aside to cover this eventuality? In the local Derbyshire Dales District Council Local Plan 2013 to 2033, paragraph 36, applications for development within the countryside will be required to submit evidence to justify why the location is required. The submission should include an indication of the alternative options that have been considered and an explanation as to why the countryside location is the preferable choice. Has this been done? Note that competitors of Forest Holidays such as Centre Parks and the new development plan for Clown use brownfield sites which they then enhance rather than the reverse which is planned here. It's against the local economic plan. The Derbyshire Dales economic plan prioritises the growth and sustainability of our many successful small and medium-sized businesses. This application from a large international offshore investment company puts undue pressure on these smaller businesses, including an established family-owned business already offering forest stays. In conclusion, this is an unsustainable, oversized and policy-contradicting proposal that would permanently damage our landscape and economy. We respectfully urge the committee to reject it.
Thank you very much, Sarah. invite Carol Taylor, please. Carol is representing Save Farley Moor campaign. Are you all right?
Thank you. So the proposed Forest Holidays development represents an unsustainable form of development conflicting, we would suggest, with NPPF sustainability objectives and with the Derbyshire Dales local plan policies. We see ourselves as a green council, the town, the district and the county, and we take pride in that. A development plan for 78 lodges, these are not small cabins, and a host of other buildings in a woodland setting must put sustainability and accessibility at the centre of every decision. Does the planning application before you do that? We would suggest it doesn't. The officer begins her report with the NPPF objectives, a social objective, fostering well-designed, beautiful and safe places with accessible services. The application states that they will be high quality, beautiful and sustainable buildings. I do hope everybody has seen the photographs that we have taken from visits to other forest holiday sites showing ugly dark brown lodges and run-down sites. Secondly, the officer quotes the environmental objective to protect our natural environment, improving biodiversity, minimising pollution and moving to a low carbon economy. Does this development do that? It doesn't. It conflicts with Derbyshire Dales local plan policies on sustainable communities and patterns of growth, and one which seeks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve resilience. Does the plan consider climate resilience? Coping with extreme weather, as I think Steve mentioned, emergency access planning. There is only one way out of this wood. Imagine a fire, as we've seen now too in Derbyshire, when everybody's trying to leave on one narrow road and the fire appliances are trying to get in on that same narrow road. On transport, does the development address carbon emissions and local impacts? Are we sure about safe and appropriate access while minimising traffic generation on rural roads? Electric bike hire is mentioned. Would you let your grandchildren cycle down Farley Hill? Taxis from the station. There isn't a taxi rank at the station. Minibuses. Will people realistically wait for a minibus when they've got their own car? We need to remind councillors of the NPPF's requirement to reduce the need for travel and to promote sustainable transport. Visitors would be reliant on cars, increasing carbon emissions and placing additional pressure on the highway network. And the sentence, a pleasant 10-minute walk to the bus stop, is laughable. It's either Jaggers Lane along Farley Hill for a 3 times a day bus, or up from the Cavendish Fields, which is 800 feet. We would suggest that long-term sustainability depends on community engagement. You've seen that tonight. We know from our meeting with the chair of the Forestry Commission last week that their remit is threefold: timber, ecology and community engagement. Let's make sure this is what happens in Matlock Forest, not giving over 1/3 of this small forest to a resource-intensive, ugly, unnecessary development which local people do not want.
Thank you very much, Carol. I have to be completely impartial as chair of this meeting, but those comments are superb, Carol. Call upon Mark Bennett now, please. Mark, again representing the Farley Moor campaign.
Chair, it's Martin.
Sorry, Martin.
That's right. Chair, councillors, I'm Martin Bennett, Ramblers, Derbyshire Dales Access Officer and Footpath Secretary. My roles are to protect and enhance access land and the right-of-way network. The history and campaigning for the right to access our land goes back many years. You will all know the history of the groundbreaking 1932 Kinder Trespass, with a protest over access to the open moorland. The inspirational 2000 Countryside Rights of Way Act gave a legal right to roam over mountain, moor, heath and down. This included walking, sightseeing, birdwatching, climbing and running. With the access land at Farley Moor, it is the freedom to walk across the northeast section of the forest that will be curtailed. The 75 cabins would sit in the corner of the main section of the forestry access land, effectively
creating ambiguity for access for the proposed site. From the map extract I had previously submitted, the narrow strip will likely create discouragement for the general public, thus potentially severing the piece of access land off Jaggers Lane, with the proposed site to the south. This planning application should be rejected as the land has been dedicated Crow Section 16 access land. The public has enjoyed a continued right of access. The development will reduce or inhibit access previously enjoyed and without encumbrance by local inhabitants. The proposal does not meet the National Planning Policy Framework because it seeks new infrastructure rather than repurposing of existing buildings. The proposals are for tourism rather than agricultural benefits, and the scheme has not been designated in the local plan. In the Office of Appraisal, it refers to my lack of comment on the proposals to upgrade the forest trails. The Ramblers Access for All campaign aims to open up the countryside for everyone. I'd be happy to meet councillors over any improvements for those with disability. My further comments can be found under the consultation responses. And indeed, the Forestry Commission has the right to remove the land from the access land designation of the proposed site and create accepted land. That is, the right to roam is removed. To paraphrase Joni Mitchell, they paved paradise and put up a camping lot. Chair, councillors, access is access. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. Angela Lewisby-Jackson. Again, Angela is representing the Save Farley Moor campaign. Yeah.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Angela Lowsby-Jackson. I have worked in local government as a countryside ranger, public rights of way officer, highways inspector and clerk of works overseeing road and footway construction. I strongly object to this application for the following reasons. Forest Holidays describe this as a sustainable development and state that the roads, parking areas and all hard surfaces will be permeable. However, their construction, in their own construction environment management plan, proposes the use of Type 1 MOT limestone and 6F5, 6F4 aggregates, with no mention of construction methodology. Through my professional experience and in the real world, these materials must be rolled and compacted to achieve the load-bearing capacity required for vehicles. Once compacted, they are effectively impermeable. Yet there is no evidence that permeability testing under the BS 13775 or in situ falling head parameter testing has or will be undertaken. As a result, this raises serious concerns regarding compliance with sustainable drainage principles and increased risk of fluvial or flash flooding. There are also concerns regarding the suitability of 6F5, 6F4 recycled aggregates in this sensitive environment and the damage they can cause to established ecosystems. These materials contain demolition waste, residues, sulfates, tarmac, contamination and concrete fines. Despite this, the applicant's pollution control statement contains no meaningful potential groundwater pollution mitigation. The applicant and the council's officers fail to acknowledge the impact on nationally important peatland and proposed infrastructure will require extensive excavation. Trenches up to 900 millimetres deep will disturb peat soils, tree roots, and releasing stored carbon and causing irreversible environmental damage. This conflicts with the National Policy Framework, which states that the development on peatland should be avoided unless there are wholly exceptional reasons and a clear strategy to causing irreversible environmental damage. Highway safety is another serious concern. Having undertaken my own site assessment using Derbyshire County Council Access Design Standards, I identified several deficiencies. A hidden dip south of the entrance, insufficient visibility displays a narrow unlit 60-mile-an-hour country lane, no pedestrian footway, no safe access for disabled users, no practical public transport provision, no indication of that a Section 278 highway agreement will be secured, no consideration for horse riders and cyclists. These issues conflict with the National Planning Policy Framework, which requires safe and suitable access and supports refusal where highway impacts are unacceptable. Finally, Forest England's own consultation for its 2020-2035 plan rules out any additional public access within the forest. Claims that this development will enhance public access and recreation are therefore unsupported.
Angela, I'll have to ask you to cease because
And
I'm
I
giving you
respectfully
extra
ask the
time.
committee to refuse it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna Stevenson, please, again representing the Save Farley Moor campaign.
I would like to start by thanking you for taking the time to give me the opportunity to speak my piece this evening and ask you to reconsider this flawed decision. I am a 15-year-old who is passionate about Farley Woods. I attend the local secondary school and I represent many of my classmates by being a member of Highfield Student Voice. Not only is Farley Woods home to a plethora of wildlife and nature, but also a safe space for people within our community to protect our physical and mental well-being. Who here has created memories in these woods? Because I know I most definitely have. In a world where we are more often than not indoors staring at screens, we are losing more and more green sanctuaries that nourish our minds and bodies. This must stop. Being able to get away from the rest of the world helps us to focus on ourselves and lets us have time to decompress. Whether that's with a furry friend, a mate, a family member, or even by yourself, it is immensely valuable. Mental health is a major struggle for the predominance of people, especially people around my age. It is important to keep local, easy to access, free places for people to get away and gain some peace of mind. Demolishing this green space will not only take away a place for us to enjoy, but will also destroy the homes of local wildlife. It will have an extremely negative ecological impact. Studies have shown that taking time in nature helps boost our mental well-being and focus. So if this woodland gets destroyed, you are not only losing trees and their unique ecosystems, but we are losing a safe space for people like you and I. And after all, it is my generation that you are making this decision for, and it is not a decision that we want. We want to be healthy in body, mind, and spirit. So, I strongly object to this planning application, and I ask you to save and protect Farley Woods for me, for us, and for now, our future generations. Thank you.
Anna, I think you'd make a good counsellor. Anna Stevenson, please. Sorry, it's the heat. It's the County Councillor for Darley-Dale, so I invite also serves as a district councillor as well. So it's Susan Hobson now, please. Susan, you know the setup, so.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Councillors. I'm the County Councillor for this area, Susan Hobson. I am strongly opposed to this application. First, I want to pay tribute to the Save Farley Moor campaigners who've worked tirelessly to save this forest. Their dedication, determination, and surely the amount of people you see here tonight show just how deeply this woodland is valued by the community. I am genuinely amazed that officers are recommending approval in the face of overwhelming local opposition and evidence. This proposal drives a coach and horses through several key policies in the local plan. This woodland is special. This development will decimate this wonderful woodland by felling 1,303 trees and introducing permanent structures, roads, lighting, and tens of thousands of extra vehicle movements a year in a tranquil area. I'm highly sceptical of the proposed biodiversity mitigation. It simply will not safeguard the wildlife that depend on this forest. Farley Lane is narrow, unlit and has no pavements. The idea that this volume of traffic can be safely absorbed without severe impact stretches credibility. This is not sustainable tourism. It is car-dependent tourism in the wrong place. It's unforgivable to destroy a much-loved public woodland by eroding its character and peaceful enjoyment by locals and visitors alike. There are serious unresolved issues around drainage and flood risk, wildfire danger and impacts on the wider historic environment. This scheme is simply too big and in the wrong place. Councillors, please remember, we were in this very council chamber only a short time ago where the Wolds inquiry was discussed, and councillors were made aware of this council's disgraceful dismissal of the valid evidence presented by residents, including David Ball, whose detailed evidence has been presented this evening by Councillor Wayne. Councillors agreed that this should never happen again. I ask that the council listen to the speakers tonight. Their evidence, not opinion, evidence. The people on the ground who know, love and value this woodland every day. Tonight is your chance to stand with the community, protect this special woodland and send a clear message that you will support your residents. I urge you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hobson. Emma Hickling, please. Emma. And you're down as a local resident to speak against the application, please.
Hi. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. The problem for councillors today is that the officer's report ignores key issues that need to be debated this evening. I have provided a 7-page document detailing features that breach 8 planning policies. 2 of these planning policies are S1, Sustainable Development Principles, and Policy PD7, Climate Change. This is a woodland area which is not close to mains water, mains electricity or mains sewage. Yet key requirements of these policies to conserve water and energy use have been ignored. Many of the features of this development lead to excessive consumption of drinking water and of energy. One example is the provision of hot tubs for every cabin. These features then result in pollution risks to the land and groundwater. As an example, the proposal to build a 3.2-kilometre pipe to take foul water, which is sewage, from the site to the Severn Trent sewer. The developer has not done an assessment of the impact and risks of any failure of this length of pipe. This pipe will run through Matlock Moor Quarry. David Ball has provided the officers with evidence that there are 2 historical landslips in proximity, and this area is identified as having a significant potential for slope instability. A geological fault and an adit run through the quarry and act as conduits, feeding the Wolds spring borehole. So, in the event of a fracture or leakage from this sewage pipe, in or within the proximity of Matlock Moor Quarry, it could contaminate the Wolds Spring, the Upper Wolds Distribution Service Reservoir and Bentley Brook. All this evidence has been provided by David Ball back in 2025, but it is not referenced in the officer's report. What if the proposed sewage pipeline is deemed technically infeasible once development has started? This is highly likely given the previous comments about running the pipeline through Matlock Moor Quarry. The officer's report makes no mention of this, but the developer's drainage strategy is very clear. If they cannot build the pipeline for whatever reason, then they will look at the next option, which is that sewage will be drained into the ground, presumably using some form of on-site treatment, but there's no mention of that in their report. They just say they'll drain it to the ground. This would inevitably lead to pollution of the local groundwater, etc., because everybody else has just spoken about that. So, If you approve this planning application tonight, you are automatically approving on-site sewage treatment if the pipeline option is not viable. Yet there has been no discussion about the risks of the on-site water treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, We have a speaker for the Campaign to Protect Rural England, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. That's Jacob Poole, please. And Jacob, you're going to speak against the application.
Yes. Hello, my name's Jacob Poole. I wish I could talk about my personal kind of relevance to Farley Moor, but I'm here to speak for Campaign to Protect Rural England. And I'm reading the speech on behalf of John Yedibley, the chair of CPRE Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, the Campaign to Protect Rural England. CPRE supports sustainable plan-led development that responds to genuine local needs and accords with national and local planning policy, including well-designed rural tourism that respects the character of the countryside. However, we also have a responsibility to protect valued landscapes, woodland and environmental assets from inappropriate developments. In assessing this proposal, we have applied the same planning principles we would expect for any countryside development: policy compliance, environmental sustainability, and long-term community benefit. Having reviewed the application and supporting technical evidence, CPRE has significant concerns regarding the suitability of this site. Firstly, the lack of justification for tourism capacity. Although the applicant has submitted numerous technical reports, including ecological landscape, the lighting assessments, none of them justify why a holiday village of this scale is appropriate for Farley Moor, or whether the site can withstand the future tourism capacity it would generate. No tourism carrying capacity assessment has been undertaken to establish the physical, psychological, social and economic limits beyond which the site and surrounding community cannot sustainably absorb visitor numbers. Without this evidence, the committee cannot be satisfied that the scale of the development proposed is appropriate to this location. Secondly, insufficient infrastructure to support the proposed population. The surrounding area offers only a school and farm alongside neighbouring holiday villages, reflecting a genuine lack of local infrastructure. Darley-Dale Town Council has raised highway safety concerns, given that the site is served by a narrow road and no pavement and a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. An estimated 65,000 visitors a year would face poor access and limited public transport. The parking, shops, cafe and trails proposed on site would be unable to meet the scale of this demand. This conflicts with MPPF paragraph 89 and the Council's own spatial vision, both of which require development in less accessible rural locations to improve sustainable access rather than increase reliance on the private car. Thirdly, harm to landscape, ecology and countryside character. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust has warned that development threatens northern Farley Moor, a crucial habitat for the nightjar, woodcock, cuckoo, tree pipit and spotted flycatcher, due to inadequate design. Derbyshire Dales Ramblers have raised the concerns that development would restrict and reduce public enjoyment of this access land, while increased urbanisation, traffic and light pollution in a forested rural area. Darley-Dale Town Council has also highlighted environmental impacts from building on peat bogland and disturbance to wildlife from heat exchangers, and the site lies within the impact zone of an SSSI. Concerns also remain regarding water supply, drainage and sewage capacity for neighbouring properties.
Jacob, I'll ask you to conclude, please.
Thank you for your consideration.
So I call upon Dr. Steve Martin, please, a local resident. Steve, if you would kindly come, and you're speaking against the application.
Thank you, Chair. And just to correct you, my name is Steve Martin. I am an honorary professor for the last 7 years in social sustainability and environmental sustainability at the University of Nottingham, and I've been a policy advisor to most governments over the last 40 years on environmental issues, and lastly but not least, to many FTSE 100 companies too. My apologies. In Miss Kate Olley's recent independent report on the walls, she said, and I quote, "In my view, steps that the Council has taken represent effective steps taken to learn lessons. I endorse those," she goes on, "in the hope
that they may serve to rebuild some trust between the council and the community. She made in total 11 recommendations to the district council, highlighting how it and the county council can improve how it involves the community. As one of many residents who provided evidence in the Wolds case, which coincidentally has been collectively praised in research conducted by the British Academy, I reflected on Kate's conclusion as I read this particular application. I've also provided evidence on the Farley Moor development, and sadly, my conclusion as a former member of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Education, that no lessons have been learned. I think this raises serious and systemic governance questions for officers and elected members, which are, why, as part of the governance procedures adopted by this council, were its citizens' evidence only superficially referenced and their detailed analysis ignored in the submission on Farley Moor? Indeed, has the lead planning officer paid any heed to Kate's recommendations at all? And is it the sole responsibility of elected members here to evaluate residents' evidence without support? I think these are key questions. Ollie also referenced the omission of the detailed evidence of David Ball, which I think is very important. He has submitted 2 comprehensive reports on the impact of flow rates into Bentley Brook. When Kate reflected in her report, I cannot help drawing the conclusion that the chances are that his evidence may not have been considered as closely as they deserved. She added, "It was explained to me that the matter has caused a huge divide between the people and council officers. For experts on governance, good decisions on policy and practice must be co-created with citizens, workers, and communities. Indeed, local democracies gain their legitimacy and support from the degree to which the people affected have genuine ownership in the goals being pursued. And finally, and that good governance is in everyone's interests."
Thank you very much, Steve. One of the ward members for Darley-Dale is Councillor Marilyn Frank. So, Marilyn, I invite you to come and speak against the application. You've got 5 minutes, Marilyn, as the elected ward member.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to remind the members of the committee that this is not an application for housing. Hence, there is no need to consider waiting due to the gap in housing supply. Your decision is entirely based on weighing possible benefits over possible harms. I hope everything you've heard tonight so far demonstrates that such a development as this, in this place, will cause great significant harm to an area of woodland which is not only a valued community asset, but is also of national significance in terms of environment and wildlife. There is also a good deal of evidence, which you would have heard, that needs to be considered carefully regarding the siting of this massive development in terms of safe access, drainage, an undemonstrated need for more cabins in this location. I haven't a great deal of time, but I will attempt to give you a summary of some of the concerns about this development. Do not think of this development as just 75 sustainable cabins. It's 75 cabins, plus cabins for staff, accommodation, office accommodation, a shop, a cafe, laundry, storage sheds, bin stores, a store for 75 cycles, a rangers area, play and recreational areas, a few hundred car parking spaces, roadways, footpaths, drainage ditches, and 75 hot tubs which have to be drained into 3 very large tanks which are buried below ground. Additionally, there's another large tank for fresh water. And then, after all of that, from this development, running for several miles down to Sandy Lane in the wolds of Matlock, through forests and across a quarry, there's going to be a sewage pipe. All of this is going to amount to much more than a third to a half of the loss of this small forest floor. Basically, in terms of wildlife, it will mean the loss of the entire wood. There are numerous areas of planning policy that this development brings into question to a greater or lesser degree. Farley Moor has not been identified in the local plan as an area suitable for development. Policy EC9 refers specifically to holiday chalets. The size of this development and its facilities are not appropriate for this small woodland. It will dominate and effectively destroy its natural wildlife. It's not in a sustainable location with regular public transport. There is no nearby regular bus service. There are no pavements, no lighting, narrow windy lanes with a 60 mile per hour national speed limit. The local major road is known for being an accident black spot. Any family walking or cycling along any of these roads or lanes to Matlock or Darleydale with their family are putting their lives at risk. The amenity, tranquility and public enjoyment of any adjacent area will be affected due to the size of this development. Policy PD3 requires developments to protect and enhance biodiversity, avoid harm to habitats and species. You've heard from other speakers details of the harms to wildlife here. Part of this woodland has been previously recognised as priority habitat. This priority status remains under the National Environment and Rural Community Act Section 41, which lists species and habitats of principal importance to England, not just this area. The DWT acknowledges that the scale of this development is not appropriate in this area and that the changes it will bring about are not in the best interest of the forest or wildlife. You've heard about Farley Woods lies above Matlock on the Wolds, and the committee are well aware of the importance of protecting the Wolds and Bentley Brook due to the impact upon Matlock town and the residents who live below. Please give serious consideration to the evidence about this, especially that provided by Mr. Ball. Policy EC7 supports tourism of an appropriate scale, which doesn't cause unacceptable harm to the environment and demonstrates a genuine need.
Councillor Franks, you've exceeded the 5 minutes now, so...
Can I just sum up?
Yes, please.
As previously stated, this development would cause environmental harm as it is of a scale that's not appropriate. I submit that the combined effect of the harms, some of which are very, very significant, by far outweigh the benefits to this community and recommend refusal of this application.
The agent acting for Forest Holidays Limited is Stephen Hearn, and Stephen, you're going to come and speak in support of the application. You have 5 minutes.
Here or there?
Up here, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Having heard the many points raised in opposition to this development, I'd just like to take this opportunity to bring us back to some of the very real and positive benefits that the proposals will create. Members will hopefully have seen the very detailed letter provided by Forestry England. This confirms the valued contribution that Forest Holidays have had at other locations across the public forest estate. And this support we welcome and is a demonstration of the unique partnership that we have with Forestry England. Currently, this woodland consists primarily of plantation non-native pine, which has reached its maturity in certain places and would be subject to felling if this development doesn't take place. The introduction of a long-term woodland management plan is proposed, which will see the woodland progressively transition from a commercial pine crop to a structured woodland of native species. This will deliver over time a more varied and diverse habitat for an assemblage of species than is currently enjoyed at the woodland. The proposals will provide 6.8 hectares of lowland heathland for nightjar and woodcock. This will be directly on Farley Moor and alongside any additional habitat provided in the forest design plan. We'll be creating multiple rides and glades throughout the woodland, improving butterfly and reptile habitat. And we'll be also restoring the locally designated wildlife site along Farley Lane, which is currently utilised for ad hoc car parking. All of this, Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, as ecological advisors of the council, are supportive of, having worked with them for many months, subject to planning conditions. We will also be proposing social benefits, a number of social benefits as picked up in the officer's report, including improved access and opportunities for a wider audience to enjoy the forest, both day visitors and guests to the cabins, allowing them to engage with nature, improving health and well-being. We're looking at a provision of new footpaths within the site and enhancements to existing trails to ensure better access for a year-round use. There'll be a new dedicated parking area provided for visitors to the forest, not just inside the forest, and this will have facilities for horse boxes as well. We'll be providing on-site interpretation, informing guests and users of the forest of the special attributes of the forest and the habitat that should be protected and avoided. There'll be opportunities for education and learning through ranger facilities, which Forest Holidays have on other sites, and currently there are schemes in place across the country other locations where Forest Holidays invite schools in to look at the forest and to learn about the woodland habitat. There are also a number of significant economic benefits arising from these proposals. Evidence presented in our economic impact assessment demonstrates that £1.7 million of visitor spend will be generated each year into the local economy. That's local pubs, shops and restaurants. There'll be 120 full-time jobs during the construction phase, and then a further 48 full-time equivalent jobs created when the cabins are active. In addition, ground rent is also paid direct to Forestry England. This will be used to help maintain, improve and invest in the woodlands of Matlock. In terms of other support, members will have seen support from Visit Peaks and the Council's own Economic Development Officer confirming that this additional accommodation is supported in this location and in line with policy. The County Highways Officer and Active England are content with the proposal subject to conditions and the implementation of a travel plan. The travel plan will provide a shuttle bus service, allowing guests access to Matlock Town Centre and the train station. We'll also be providing e-bikes on site. There'll be a provision for car sharing for staff. As said, there'll be improved footpath links within the site, and the site will remain completely public access as it has done previously. We've positively engaged with the local lead flood authority and have undertaken additional ground investigative work, confirming that there are no deep peat deposits on site. There's no groundwater found in any of the borehole testing that we undertook, and fundamentally the local lead flood authority have no groundwater issues subject to conditions. Severn Trent Water have provided conditional approval for the foul connection, confirming that there's capacity in the network and are not happy with the management of the foul system and the hot tub water. Members will recall from recent decisions that the approval of statutory undertakers is sufficient to confirm that surface and foul water drainage should not form a reason for opposing an application. The county ecologists are happy with the the county archaeologists are happy with the proposals following additional investigative work after the time team visited site.
Thank you, Stephen. I've given you over the 5 minutes, so that concludes your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I suggest at this point, particularly to members, we're going to have an adjournment for, let's say, till 7:30. Now, there are toilets also downstairs for the public if you wish to make use of them. And as I said earlier, there is some drinks, water, etc., coffee through there. Now, members, in front of you, you've got some late correspondence and one or two submissions that we do need to look at before we move on to the officer's presentation. So if members of the public want to stretch the legs for, as I say, we'll reconvene the meeting at 7:30. Will someone? Is that seconded? All those in favour, please show. That is not unanimous, but it is the majority. Councillor Sharon. Can I just say the screen is now operating and working. If anyone wants to be in a cooler place, do make use of the room in there. There's plenty of chairs, and it's certainly a lot cooler than being in here. I'll just give it a few moments for the other people. So in the process now of determining the application, the proposed creation of 75 numbered timber cabins with associated reception, shop and cafe, maintenance building, natural play area, ranger station, storage pods, recycling points and ancillary roads, paths and parking. We listen now to the case officer, Rosie Dinnan, and then after Rosie's presentation to members, we will, in our normal practice, have questions from members. So I'll invite the case officer now, please, to outline your report. Rosie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. You've just nicely described the proposal for me, so I'll move on to the next slide. So here's the site location plan. This is the site lined in red. So the application site is 57.17 hectares out of a total of 178 hectares, which comprises Farley Moor, which, as members are aware, that's one of many woodlands that comprises Matlock Forest. Here's just a quick aerial view. I know most members had the benefit of the site visit this afternoon, so it shows it in the context of the surroundings. You've got Farley Lane to the west, and you've got Matlock Farm Park to the north, Sydenham Hall to the west of Farley Lane there, and the woodland beyond the site extends to the south. This is just a quick plan showing public rights of way. There's proposals to upgrade forest trails. They're shown on blue on the plan. And there's some existing routes up from Matlock which have been identified as connection points through for walkers. Just a few photographs of the site. This is the site entrance at the moment onto Farley Lane. It's currently gated, so there's only access for maintenance. And this is the existing entrance into Farley Lane looking northeastwards. And that's to southwest. And as members would note from the site visit today, at the moment there's only an opportunity for a few cars to park at this point, and that's where the committee bus parked today. So this is the layout plan for the development. So it's 75 cabins. They're arranged in 4 main clusters off a central access point. So this is the access in from Farley Lane. You then come in. This is the proposal for a new car parking area. And you continue on round on this existing forest track. And then you've got the first cluster of cabins here. And then you've got what we're calling the main retreat building or reception area, which also has a small cafe and shop, and here's the maintenance buildings and staff accommodation, and then you've got these 3 other clusters here which we walked up to today. So in terms of the 75 cabins, there's a mix of proposals. There's 9 1-bed cabins, there's 35 2-bed cabins, which also includes 1 DDA unit. There's 22 3-bed cabins, which includes 1 disabled unit as well. And there's 5 4-bedroom cabins and 4 4-bed cabins which also have tree houses. So the proposals also including upgrade site trails, so they're shown in blue here. And I mentioned the public car park. There's also be car parking here next to the retreat building, and the intention is that the retreat building, which has a cafe and a shop, will be available for general users to use who would just be enjoying the woods and not just guests. Right, so here's a more detailed one. I've probably explained most of the proposals, but you can see here, so that's the retreat building and that's associated car parking with it. These are the lodges. There's 2 spaces for the smaller units, and the 4-bed units has 3 spaces, and this is the maintenance area. That's a unit there with a tree house. And they've all got recycling stations within each of the areas. This is the northern section of the site. So members walked up here today. So it's just a close-up view of the different arrangements in the cabins. So this is the tree protection plan. As I noticed in the report, the proposal would involve the removal of 1,303 trees, but if members look at this plan, you'll see the amount of trees remaining. The minimum tree removal will occur to put the cabins in place. So I've got a couple of close-ups there. And I've done a zoom in detail just of a couple of the cabins there, so that you can see that there'd be these sort of exclusion zones set up, construction exclusion zones set up around the cabins, so to ensure that the trees that remain aren't disturbed, and it only necessitates the removal of the trees identified there. So a tree survey accompanied the application, which that's all detailed in the report. We also, I've got here the internal drainage plan, because there's been a lot of talk about that tonight already. So there will be some holding tanks on site. That's for holding the hot tub water. So there's a proposal for one up there, and also I think most of it's down in the maintenance area. So this surface water drainage plan shows all the drainage connections from the cabins, and how that would go into the new drainage system. This is the plan that shows how it would go off-site and down towards Sandy Lane. And I've got some elevations here of some of the cabins. I haven't got all of them here, but this is the 2-bed DDA compliant cabin. So this is one with wheelchair access. So it's got a ramp into it. You'll see the decking area there without outdoor table and the hot tub. And then this is a 4-bed cabin, which actually has an upper floor to it as well, but it's a stepped access to that. They're all timber construction. They're all sort of relatively similar appearance with these 2 mono pitch roof. They've all got this external decking area, and they're all sort of spaced sort of about 20 metres or so apart, to ensure privacy. I've also got an image here of the treehouse structure, and there's an image there about how it sits in the forest. That's from one of the existing forest holiday sites. And this is the retreat building, which is basically the reception building. This is also timber clad, so it's all very similarly designed. And that's the layout plan for it. So you see the shop area there, some tables for the cafe, and also sort of toilets and other facilities there as part of the reception building. This is the maintenance building. Sort of very simple elevations there, also timber clad as well. And here's some images of from Forest Holidays' existing sites. So you can see that the tree removal is kept to a minimum, and the cabins are in amongst the woods. So one of the things that's sort of discussed in detail in the report is the biodiversity net gain. And there's been extensive discussions with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust over this during the course of the application. And the proposal is to create 6.8 hectares of lowland heathland in this purple area, which members looked at when they were on site today. That's to be set aside to create a new habitat area for nightjars and other species. So the biodiversity net gain would all be secured through the legal agreement, Section 106, and I've sort of outlined in the report what would be required based on Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, what they require. So they require quite a lot of detail about its management and monitoring to ensure that it works. There'd be signage and measures to avoid disturbance from humans and dogs, and measures to ensure that worked, and that would be actively managed and monitored. So the applicant would be required to submit reports as they are with biodiversity net gain to ensure that it's working, and if the level's not achieved, then measures have to be put in place to get that biodiversity improved. And this is Sitges Plantation, which has been identified as an off-site location that would deliver a new wet woodland, and so this is an off-site biodiversity net gain, and that would be secured by the legal agreement. So in the report, I outline a number of Section 106 terms that are needed to have an illegal agreement should the application be approved. That would be for biodiversity net gain, the nightjar conservation management plan, a travel plan, and also the forest trails to ensure they're implemented. There was also an addendum to my report, which members should have received, just a one-pager, suggesting the addition of a condition number 30 on fire safety, which was in the draft report but somehow didn't make the published version, so apologies for that. So the intention is that it's a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the conditions, all 30 of them, and the Section 106 agreement with delegated authority to Director of Place and Economy to approve any amendments to those conditions as deemed necessary.
Thank you very much. Can I just remind members, I have to say to each meeting, at this point, please, concise questions, not statements. We can make statements later when we're having a debate, and I'm sure out of what we've heard tonight and from what's just been related by the case officer, there are lots of questions. Councillor Slack, I think you indicated first. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Rosie here. Some of the speakers have indicated that in the process of erecting these wooden chalets, there will be danger that carbon could be released from the peat underneath, and it could cause a lot of well, we don't want carbon releasing, obviously, and it'll cause a lot of damage. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Slack. I was just trying to find a bit in my report where I addressed that, and that's paragraph 7.60, where I note that the representations have made concerns about disturbance underlying peat and the release of CO2, but the construction measures have been tailored to ensure ground disturbance is kept to a minimum. And we've had the SEMP confirm that no large-scale excavation proposed due to the mini piling, and because it's going to be suspended, the disturbance is going to be minimal.
Can I just come back? Can I come back on that?
Yes, a supplement.
When they erecting these cabins, will there be concrete structures going down in the ground or to bolt onto? They're pouring concrete down there into the peat. Do you know what?
It's still piled from what I
Yeah,
understood.
the piles,
yeah.
and hammering them down into the peat, so there will be a loss of CO2, won't there? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stuart Lee. Is anyone else wants to ask questions? Please indicate. Thank you, Laura. And then, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. 3 quick questions, if I may. What's been done, if anything, about if planning permission is granted against the historic rights of the local citizens with the water situation, with water going into their wells, boreholes, whatever they've got? Is anything being done regarding that? As one question, please. And the other question I got was, on your slides, it looked like there was flues on these buildings. Is that the case, or are there something different? Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just finding the slides for the cabin. So yeah, that shows a wood burning stove in that floor.
Councillor Lee.
I'll come back with that one in debate, Chair.
Oh. Any supplementary questions?
Just
Stuart?
what about the water course? That's the other one. The water going into the historic rights of the local citizens. Infringement of the common law. If the water goes into their wells, etc.
I think that was the comments from the Clean Rivers Trust, and paragraph 7.108, I address that. That those dwellings have their own private water supply, and this development will have a new water supply. So there wouldn't be. I think there was concern that they would lose water pressure, or their supply would conflict with it.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, my question wasn't that. My question regarding the water that's going to run off the roofs, etc., is going to go into the ground, which is going to go into the historic wells, if you like, water courses of the local citizens, which is going to infringement on the common law, because it's going to go into their water supply. So they're going to end up with, in my view, or looking like it could be contaminated water, which is going to be seeping through into their well supply that they've got now. That was my question.
Rosie,
if you've got anything on that.
The surface water would just be rainfall that would fall onto the forest floor, so it would get absorbed by the forest floor.
Right, just my final one, Chair, if I may. Are any other emergency routes going to be provided for access for emergency vehicles?
Sorry,
You've got the main route of access into the site. There are alternative ways of getting into the site aside from.
Yeah, but are they going to be made available?
It's a single point of vehicle access.
Yeah.
But you've had no objection from Derbyshire Fire Service?
No.
Yes or no?
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, I do apologise. I should have brought you in earlier as
I
representing
wasn't
County
sure whether it was
Council
it
Highways.
was a question for me or a question for Rosie,
Yeah.
actually. But no,
whoever wants to answer it.
Essentially, there's a single point of vehicular access to the site, and that's the main access onto Farley Lane. The applicant's proposing to improve that access by providing additional width and curb radii at the point where it meets Farley Lane. It would accommodate two-way movement along the initial section into the site. And in terms of dealing with emergency access, I believe, and this is why I was leaving to Rosie, who's probably looking frantically for it, but there has been consultation with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue. As I understand it, they raised no objection.
Come back in debate, Chair.
Yeah, before Maelstrom, if members have any relevant questions pertaining highways, I do apologise. I should have introduced you earlier. You've come representing the County Council Authority. Thank you. Laura.
Thank you. Has there been any noise assessment or projection of the noise that might be generated by cars, children, dogs, heat pumps, hot tubs, etc., and the effect of that on wildlife?
We consulted our environmental health colleagues on the application and they didn't raise any concerns about noise, but we have added a condition about noise to do with any plant because we are sort of aware of air source heat pumps can cause disturbance.
Councillor Maelstrom, do you have a supplementary question? You're okay. Councillor Bob Butcher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we had a lot of problems raised tonight, and I should have talked to you earlier, I guess, Rosie, but it would be helpful to address a number of those, or as many of those as you can, in the presentation. So it's a composite question. Things that were top of my mind, well, two things about the lessons from the Wold. One was have the pressure group in this case been consulted, are their views, and I can see you put them in the report, but it feels like they don't feel they've had their concerns addressed adequately. But more precisely, the issue of flooding, and I'm surprised that other councillors aren't raising these questions, who are perhaps more detailed expert than I am. Are we not committing the same issue as was found in the Wolds in the Gritstone Road inquiry, of allowing extra development with extra water runoff that will feed into Bentley Brook and potentially cause flooding further down the line? Is that being addressed adequately in your view? And indeed, if you can address other top concerns of the people that were raised tonight, that would be helpful.
I've done my best to do as a thorough and comprehensive report as possible, and members probably appreciate it's a much longer than your standard committee report that comes before committee. So we did get a large volume of objections, and a lot of people are here tonight. So we've done our best to review them and summarise all the issues, and then address them all as we go through the report. In terms of flooding, obviously the lead local flood authority at Derbyshire County Council are our consultee. There was work involved throughout the process where percolation tests and things were done to look at drainage, and the end result was they were happy, subject to conditions being imposed. They didn't raise any objections to the proposals.
Any supplementary questions, Bob?
Yes, that sounds like the same problem we were in with the Wolds, where the local flood authority didn't have any concerns, and yet when the inspector looked at it, there were serious concerns. So I wonder if we've also potentially at risk of overlooking, I think we heard from evidence from David Ball, is that the name, who was the main person who raised issues previously, and he says there are similar issues here, I understand. Have those been dealt with as far as you're concerned satisfactorily?
Cheers, can I mean, I think the key thing as far as officers are concerned is, yes, absolutely, the lessons have been learned from the Wolds appeal, and the concerns of residents are noted, and some very detailed and thorough submissions have been made in relation to this application, and we have read through those, and they have been taken account of. I do think, however, they're very different applications. This is a proposal for holiday lodges within the forest, where the water will go straight off the roofs of the cabins straight into the ground. That water would be going into the ground anyway from the trees that already exist there. So it's a very different proposition to a residential site where you have tarmac, you have hard surfacing, you have drainage that's needed to drain the water coming off the roofs of the houses. And all of that in the Wold situation, going into very complicated hydrology and underground. There was unknown factors which the inspector recognised about underground flows of water due to the complicated hydrology there. So I think this is a very different type of proposal on a very different type of site, albeit one that, of course, forms part of that broader drainage system, natural drainage system. So I think as officers, as Rosie said, the county were involved, and I know have been up to site, and I know that percolation tests and so forth have taken place. So that's the reason that, whilst we acknowledge some very detailed submissions that have been made, what officers always have to have regard to is it sufficient in terms of an appeal situation. We've come to the view in this case not. Obviously, it's for members to come to their own view.
Okay, Councillor G. Gareth, and then Councillor Hughes. Councillor G.
Yeah, thank you. Rosie, could you confirm that in, I think it was April 2025, this council implemented a policy to implement double council tax on second homeowners?
I don't actually know about these, but this won't be second homeowners because it's going to be run by Forest Holidays, so people will just be renting the accommodation.
No, but I just need you to affirm. I mean, I can answer that myself if one, because the point I'm making is that I think one of the experts who's spoken this evening, and by the way, I'd like to compliment, I think it was Anne, and you mentioned it because you mentioned about her being a prospective councillor, but I think she's got more talent than anything I've seen in this chamber in the last 3 years, so I think she could go way above that. But one of the experts mentioned the phrase tourism carrying capacity, because my worry is that you've removed that in one place and put the demand in another. So you're creating a demand to demoralise the countryside with developments like this when it was organically being produced, but your policies are actually, it's an about turn. That's really where I'm coming from.
It's not really a question, it was a comment. We'll leave that for now, Gareth, and you can bring it up later, true to form. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm returning to the comments about the interaction between council officers and residents. I was wondering whether you've had any meetings with, say Farley Moor and representatives during the analysis of the application, and well, that's the first question, I guess.
I personally haven't. I'm the second case officer to deal with this application.
Okay. So the issue arises that we've got some quite respected individuals who are two professors, several people who had relevant professional qualifications, saying that there are problems in drainage and ecology on this site, and you have dealt with it in the report, but in lots of ways, given the qualifications of the people concerned, it would appear, I would suggest that they deserve some sort of discussion over the conclusions that have been reached to determine whether they were happy with the evidence, and would it have been possible to have put their evidence to experts in the field. We know that we've had concerns with the local flood authority on previous occasions. We've used external consultants, but we need the issue is ecology, hydrology, geology, and drainage.
Rosie, can you comment, or Chris?
I mean, the normal way the process works is obviously that the residents would feed their input into those issues, which they have done, and some very detailed comments have been submitted. We have to take those on board. We also have to take on board the comments of the lead local flood authority. So we haven't sent those comments to the lead local flood authority, although they do have access to the council's website, so they're able to review when they review an application. They review the application submissions made by the applicant, and they're able to view any submissions made by local residents. The same can be said of ecology. There has been a lot of going back and forth with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust on the ecology. They did raise some significant concerns earlier in the process. They got one thing I think is useful to point out is that we've had two different responses from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, because they effectively it's from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust in two different capacities. So the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust has a service level agreement with the council to provide technical input on ecology, matters of ecology and biodiversity. That arm of Derbyshire Wildlife Trust is now satisfied that with the Section 106 that's being recommended and the conditions that have been recommended, they don't object to the proposals. The other part of Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, which is I believe a registered charity, has submitted an objection. So that's the reason for two conflicting state submissions there. Ultimately, as I say, it's for the committee to take a view on these matters as well. So officers are providing our views tonight, and it's for the committee to come to its own conclusions. The committee's entitled to look at the points that the residents have submitted, just as officers have done, and the committee will have to come to its own on balance decision on these matters.
Okay, I mean the issue for me is we've got one side saying that there won't be any infiltration into the groundwater, and at the other side saying there will be because the posts will create a hazard that will allow water to move from the ponds that form within the peat down into the underlying permeable rock. And as a non-expert, I don't understand how that would happen, but an expert who told us that in the room today suggests that it could happen.
I think another key factor, which I omitted just then, that officers are having regard to is the fact that this is a commercial forestry plantation. So at some stage, if this development doesn't go ahead, the tree cover will be removed in any case, and there will be an impact at that point on the water reaching the ground. I would, although I'm not an expert on that issue, suggest far greater than would be the case for the Holiday Lodge development, because as has been seen from the slide, has been seen from the slide, which I don't know if you can get up, Rosie, the actual number of trees being removed in the context of the trees that are on the site is actually relatively small, although the overall headline figure is large. So the fact that this is a commercial forestry plantation where the trees will be removed at some point, and all the consequent impact on hydrology and soil disturbance and so on that will involve, is a material planning consideration which is taken into account in the round in terms of, I'm explaining where officers are coming from. Obviously, it's for the committee is quite entitled to come to a different view, taking these matters in the round.
Okay, thank you for that very thorough answer, Chris. I've got one other question, which is about the sewage pipe. We've heard that it's quite a complex. It'll be quite a complex pipe to put in because it has to have storage capacity along its way, and there's a steep drop of probably 50 to 80 metres or something like that to reach Sandy Lane, and the consequence of that is that there'll be a requirement for a reservoir at the bottom of that drop, so that the sewage doesn't create excess pressure into the mains. So the question is, that's going to be an expensive thing to put in place, and the applicant has proposed that if they don't do that, they will presumably have a borehole and put the water down a borehole. Now, the question is that how do we make sure that the first applies, given that if a condition is found to be unviable, then it doesn't hold with the applicant. The applicant doesn't need to concern themselves with it.
If that's a concern of the committee, and I understand that you know, a number of people tonight have raised the concern about borehole contamination. I think it's entirely reasonable, if the committee were minded to grant permission, that a condition was attached that sewage should not be dealt with in that manner, and the reason being the concern about contamination to groundwater and consequent impacts on households' water supplies. I think that would be entirely reasonable condition.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shelley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris and Rosie. You've had an unenviable task, as indeed we all have around the table tonight, in compressing all of this information into what is actually a relatively short report. My fear is that in the process of doing that, it misses some of the more detailed nuances, which are actually very, very important. So I've got several questions. I'll take them one at a time, if that's okay. So the first one relates really to how visitors are actually going to use this space. I've read through the documentation, and I can't really see much of an assessment of the amount of time that people are likely to spend on the site. I'd hoped that the applicant would do that in their presentation, actually, but we've not heard that. So there's a lot of assumptions going around. I'm just testing these with you to see whether you've thought about these and whether you've taken independent advice on this, about how much time people are likely to be expected from their 4-day stays to be spending on site, because from that falls all sorts of other questions about how often they're going to be leaving the site in whatever form. So that's my first question, please.
Obviously, I've just put the plan up, so there are some on-site facilities for the guests to use on their stay. Obviously, we can't dictate human behaviour, so some people might be happy just for the weekend of, you know, staying there and not doing very much, but others might be in their car at the first opportunity to drive to Chatsworth or something. You know, we can't really predict that, but there is enough on the site for people to do. There will be these trails that, you know, not everyone will feel the need to leave the site as much as you may on another camping site elsewhere.
Roger?
So my question was really whether you've taken independent advice on the likelihood of that.
I don't know how you can guesstimate how people would...
Well, you could look at other sites, similar sites around the country.
I mean, a lot of the applicant, as part of their evidence, they have put a lot of information, and particularly the transport information is based on the vehicular movements from their sites as an evidence base of, you know, when the peak comings and goings are to and from the site.
And I just interject, Roger, can you shed any factual?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I suppose yeah, as Rosie's just indicated, our transport survey provides assessment of a lot of the existing operations, so the existing 13 sites that we've got in the country. That provides an analysis of vehicle movements to and from the site. So by inference, that will give you an idea of who's moving where and when.
Okay, I mean, forgive me, because that information hasn't fed its way through to the report, and as councillors, we're not experts in this, but like all these other things that have been suggested, we rely on this report for making our decision. I won't test you any more on that, because every site around the country is, of course, different.
Of course.
Thank you. My second question.
question.
Yeah. rightly, I think there's quite a focus on the importance of policy EC9. There's an alphabet soup of policies, in case you're not aware of this. EC9D, which is to do with the connectivity of the site by means other than road access by car. For me, that's very, very important because it follows through to the council's wider sustainability policies. And I'm focusing particularly, Rosie and Chris, on paragraph 7.15 of your report, where there appears to be an inherent contradiction. It admits the site is not within a 10-minute walk of regular public transport services, but then it says that in this kind of forest setting, we wouldn't expect that anyway. For me, that just doesn't stack up. We have to have a policy which is defensible, and so my question is, in an appeal situation, which is what we're really looking at here tonight, we should be looking forward. If we're going to turn this down to an appeal, it's not trying to convince everybody here, it's trying to convince barristers who are very well paid from another organisation. Are we going to be able, in your opinion, your professional opinion, to stand up in that situation and say that this does not meet with policy EC9 section D?
So, obviously, that is a key point which officers always consider in coming to a recommendation. Can this position be defended at appeal? And officers have looked at the evidence and the submissions, in taking into account the fact that this is a holiday lodge development, a forest holiday lodge development. Officers have taken the view that that type of development necessarily is in a forest, and therefore that type of development is there's going to be limited availability of sites, suitable sites that has public transport accessibility and is close to a town centre. That said, I go back to the point that I made earlier, that is that is the officer position. The committee is able to come to its own view on such matters. The policy criterion is perhaps more clear than some others in the local plan. So I think there is a clear policy there which members need to be satisfied, and that is the key policy. And I think what the committee needs to be is satisfied that the criteria in that policy are met. Officers have come to the view it is, and on balance, we feel that an appeal is we've had in coming to that position. We've had regard to the appeal situation. I'll leave it there.
Okay,
Thank you, Shelley.
And I think for now, I mean, there are questions about things like the capacity of the holding tanks, which are well over my head again. I would appeal to you to answer our question really. Has the holding tank capacity for the number of properties there been independently assessed? Because a lot, from the point of view of sustainability of the site, seems to depend on that. It's a huge undertaking. So that's the foul water capacity.
It's not. It has been assessed by the lead local flood authority, but there's not been any other party that has assessed the holding capacity. They are satisfied with the proposals, and they've not raised objection to those. I mean, to be fair, those are matters of detailed design, which I would expect, if there's a concern about those, that can be addressed by way of condition requiring increased capacity or details to be submitted at a later date. So normally that kind of thing is quite capable of being addressed by way of a suitably worded planning condition if there's a particular concern about it.
Yes, and obviously what we're trying to do is to probe those things where we feel that there isn't sufficient conditioning possible. My final one, I think, relates to biodiversity net gain. It has been suggested in some of the submissions that there's double counting going on, and the use of citrus plantation isn't sufficient, and that goes through all the way to some of the documents from the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, where there's a reference I noticed from Kieran Houston, who said that DWT cannot be certain that citrus plantation will be sufficient to cope with the requirements of biodiversity net gain, page 7 of his document. So if Derbyshire Wildlife Trust can't be certain, and they are our independent assessor for this kind of thing, how can we be certain? How can you reassure us on that one, please?
So the biodiversity net gain is going to be secured through a legal agreement which requires monitoring and managing, and part of that, if it's underperforming, there will be a requirement for that to improve. So at the moment, it's predicted that it can reach the biodiversity net gains, and that will get monitored in time to ensure that it does.
Okay. I'll bring it. Thank you. Please, and then finally, Councillor Hughes. Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick one. Thank you, Rosie. Difficult one to take on from Sarah. It's quite a simple one. I think Chris mentioned the idea that if this doesn't go ahead, then the existing plan, which is rotated clear felling, will proceed. Now, this local planning authority has no control of that at all. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a plantation woodland, so those trees could be felled in due course.
David, did you have a final question? And then we'll move into debate, please.
Yes, Chair. Just out of courtesy, really, because I'm going to bring it up into debate. I have concerns under policy S4, S4B, and in the report, the report discusses this. The S4B says that development is allowed if it represents the sustainable growth of tourism or other rural-based enterprises in sustainable locations where identified needs are not met by existing facilities. That's in paragraph 7.22. Now, and 7.23 and 7.24 argue that Darwin Forest and Darwin Lakes don't provide competitive products. And also reference the fact that this is the opinion of the applicant. And I'm a bit concerned that we've dismissed that criterion on the basis of the applicant's opinion, rather than perhaps that without taking consideration of Darwin Forest and Darwin Lakes opinions. And I think I've noted in the letter from Darwin Forest that they seem to have a different opinion. So can I ask why paragraph 7.724 says it, that the addendum reviews potential displacement from Darwin Forest, but it is ultimately concluded to be low and anticipates the majority of the Farley Moor guests would be existing forest holiday clients who wish to experience the new site. I just find that a dismissal of Darwin Forest and Darwin Lake. I'm confused.
I think we've got a couple of issues there. So obviously policy S4B, which you quoted and has been addressed in 7.22 to 7.24, looks at sustainable growth of tourism and where needs are not met by existing facilities. So the point was being made by the applicant that there is a different type of facilities, that Forest Holidays product is more within the forest, whereas Darwin Forest is a more manicured site with lawns and tarmac, and it attracts different clientele. Sorry? Yeah, I mean, it's got more on-site facilities.
Sorry, Rosie, can I come back? Not in this market, but in the...
It's a question, Dave,
yeah,
because
it's
we're
a
getting...
question, but in the telecommunications market, I've had some experience of doing product analysis and looking at, for a regulator, and looking at competition between products, and it's not an easy thing to do. And just because the products have different characteristics in detail doesn't mean to say that they are different. They're in a different product market. They may be in the same product market and competitive. And I can't see that it is appropriate for a planning paper to have a statement about competition within it and take a view, a one-sided view, against perhaps one of the established businesses already in it, or two established businesses in Derbyshire Dales, without putting their views forward as well. So can I ask that paragraphs 7.23 and 7.24 are actually withdrawn from this paper as giving bias to the whole discussion of that particular criteria?
Chair, they can't be withdrawn from the report because the report's in the public domain. But as I've said a couple of times previously, if the committee disagree with some of the assessments that have been made, it's for the committee to then come to a different reasoned view. And I take the point about it could be viewed that the market is broader than perhaps how it's been looked at within the officer report, and that there may be overlap of demand for of customer profile for the two types of development. That's for the committee to take a view on. What is clear though in planning law terms, one can't take account of a development taking business away from another development, because that can't be taken account of in terms of planning law. That's not a legitimate planning consideration. But the point about demand, I understand the point you're making there.
Chris, I understand that, but the issue is that the criterion is quite clear, and the criterion states we can ask the question: is there a need for another operator within the same market? That is the question that we can ask, and I would suggest that there is evidence that they are overlapping products, and therefore we need to take that overlap into consideration and consider whether there is a need or whether the market is satisfied by the current offering.
Okay, David, you've had good time. We need someone move that we extend the meeting by an hour, please. Will somebody do that? Is that seconded? All those in favour, please show. I don't want we've had questions now. I want to get to the meat of the matter, and let's have a framework in terms of, does someone at this point, will someone move now, either we support the officer recommendation or we go for refusal? Councillor G.
Yeah, I'd like to go for refusal, so I'd like to basically turn round the recommendations that we refuse it based on...
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Shelley, thank you. A motion before us for refusal. It's now open to members to speak for or against the motion.
We need reasons for refusal.
Reasons for refusal at this point. What about significant aspect to the character of the location, highway issues of safety? David Hughes and Gareth.
Chair, with my analysis, because I'm not an ecologist or a biologist or I can't, and a geologist, I can't really talk about those, but I have some understanding of economics, and therefore I have three. These are just ideas. I thought we could go through the concerns that we might have, or the value we put in the application before coming to a decision about whether or not we refuse or not, or approve. But my concerns are to do with policy policy S4, development in the countryside, policy EC1, new and existing employment development, and policy E9, holiday chalet caravans and campsite development. S4 That's development in the countryside. There are two concerns I have. K, it preserves and or enhances, the criterion is it preserves and or enhances the character, appearance and local distinctiveness of the landscape and landscape setting of the Peak District National Park. Well, I'm not sure that is particularly relevant, but in this case, but I don't think it does promote the character, appearance and local distinctiveness of the landscape, and could change it if the footpaths are improved significantly, which I doubt will actually happen. The second concern is one used in the paper to justify approving the application. It represents the sustainable growth of tourism or other rural-based enterprises in sustainable locations where identified needs are not met by the existing facilities. I would argue that, and I've looked at the two websites. There is a comment in the report again saying that Darwin Lake's focus is on wedding markets and group markets. That's not true. You can book on Darwin Lakes with just looking for one couple looking for a cottage on Darwin Lakes.
David, I'll have to interject because Councillor Bob Butcher, legitimately, it's within the code of practice. You said a point of order, Bob. What is your...
Yes, I think it's really unhelpful to have a scattergun of objections brought up. We found this appeals in the past. We have a load of objections and then only one ends up being the one that actually counts. So we need to be, and these are things which haven't been asking questions and they aren't clearly things that are issues. So I would sincerely say the proposer should have at least one clear reason for refusal and say that is, and then we can debate that, and if there's other ones to add on, we can bring those in the debate.
I am a little confused on chairing the meeting because I would have thought it was far healthier and better that we got the feel, and if the committee refused, then it makes sense to put forward what those reasons, you know, rather than us spending perhaps the next 50 minutes finding the motion falls. But however, Councillor G, you have moved the motion.
Yeah.
Gareth, what do you feel is the significant planning reason for refusal?
I just think, I think it's a big mistake by the council, and the council needs to recognise when it's making a mistake. Over the last 2 years, we've been through this situation with the Wolds. This is a huge, devastating loss to open amenity, forest, landscape, countryside. Then it doesn't go along with the relevant, you know, in terms of provision of holiday homes in low scale in the policy statement. So it's way above that, and I think the council is just making a mistake in recommending approval of it. So that's why we've heard it all tonight.
Not the council, Councillor G. We're here
but
to
the
determine...
Officers,
well, she's not...
Yeah, the
Rosie,
officers'
with the respect,
recommendations.
isn't the council.
So,
you are the council.
Yeah, so we're making a different decision where we want to recommend refusal based on the loss of the amenity space, countryside, and obviously we've got issues surrounding possible flood risk, etc. I mean, we've heard all that tonight from various experts, but I think we've got a very good standing. We've had an experience with the Wolds. We don't want to make the same mistakes again, so let's just go for it, go for the vote.
Chair, can I...
Let's just get it clear, the grounds we're putting forward for refusal. Now,
Chair.
have you grasped from Gareth?
This is
please, can I come
valuable
back?
landscape.
I was interrupted him when I was speaking, and then you went over to Gareth. Can I come back and finish my points?
Well,
because
okay.
I think it was really unfair that a point of order was taken and you didn't return to me.
But
so please, can I return?
We need to know what the reasons are for refusal.
I've told you the reason. The first reason was it doesn't conform with policy S4 into S4B because the identified needs are met already by existing facilities. It doesn't conform to EC1 because the higher value employment opportunities and training provisions will not be local. They will be in Chester probably, where Forge Holidays has its economic base, and the profits will be offshored to an equity partner, private equity provider, and so they will not be within Derbyshire Dales. And in addition to that, because it's competitive with existing businesses within Derbyshire Dales, it is possible that those businesses will be damaged by this new, and that will, the result will be less revenue coming to Derbyshire Dales. We don't know because no economic model has been produced. The only thing that Derbyshire Dales gets out of this particular application is low value employment, minimum wage employment. And we know we only got 1.9% claimant unemployment. We've heard that it's difficult to get minimum wage employees to do these jobs. Therefore, it's unlike it will place greater pressure on the other enterprises that make use of those resources. So, in terms of the new and existing employment development, the high value jobs go elsewhere. The low value jobs will be all that Derbyshire Dales gets out of it, and we've got enough of those already. The purpose of our economic development plan is to increase the value of employment, not to just go for jobs for the minimum wage. So EC1 has clear objectives: encourage a greater presence of high value businesses in the plan area, encourage small scale and startup businesses. This is maybe a high value business, but the high value is outside the area. It's not a small scale business, it's already a large business with Sykes Holidays and others involved in it. And the third one is, of course, supporting the visitor-based service sector jobs within the local tourism. And then we have policy EC9, and EC9 talks about it being in a sustainable location within or in close proximity to an existing settlement with good connections to the main public highway and the public rights-of-way network or cycle services, and either served by public transport or is within an attractive 10-minute walk of regular public transport. It's not. It's 50 minutes from regular public transport by my calculation and using Google. And even then, and that is walking down Farley Hill, not walking through the forest, which would not be appropriate if you're going to catch a bus at the end. The only reason for walking through the forest would be recreation. It would be if you walk through the forest to Matlock, 30 minutes or 40 minutes through the forest, you're just visiting friends in a residential area, in Wolds Rise, or you might visit myself or some other councillors who live in that direction. But you wouldn't get to the shops. The shops are another 15 minutes down a hill, and that hill is 600 feet. Those shops are 600 feet below the level of this application. So the walk back would involve a climb of 600 feet plus a 50-minute walk. So it would take you over an hour. So EC9, so it fails on EC9D. It fails on EC1 in a number of different areas, and it fails on S4B. So those are my reasons.
That's a good basis. That's very helpful.
Those are my reasons for rejecting this application.
Now then, Roger, what would you like to say?
Thank you. People need to realise in this room that these nuances, this alphabet soup, is really, really important. If this goes to appeal after this process, you can't introduce new things, or at least not very easily. You have to be able to defend the decisions based on the policy decision you're taking now at this very moment. You could say it's one of the flaws of the planning process. The planning process isn't logical, it's not fair, it doesn't reflect your views. I'm really sorry about that, but as councillors we have to bear that in mind, because it will be your council taxpayers' money on the line if we mess this up. For that reason, I'm very, very tempted to stick to the one thing that I can see that the application can't escape from, and that is EC9D. Its location means that it is fundamentally unsustainable for access by any other means than the road, any serious access. And from that, you could tack on, if you felt so minded, policy EC8, where there's a sentence which says the council will support tourism and provision for visitors which is appropriate to the settlements and countryside and consistent with environmental objectives. But that's very much that's a nuanced one. That's a supporting one. It's not the primary one. The primary one has to be something where we are confident we stand a very, very good chance of defence if this goes to the next stage.
We're firming up at the moment. Reasons for refusal now. Councillor Slack first indicated before you, Gareth. So it's Councillor Slack, then Councillor G, and please focus on what we're doing at the moment is looking for the reasons why it is.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've missed one item which is very essential. This whole development is on a big, massive peat. It's all peat under there, and they're developing on a massive peat. And when you start tampering with that, you're going to release carbon and CO2, and it's going to be dangerous to the... I think this has got to be included in it, Roger. You know, climate change is very important now, and we've got to stop it wherever possible, and this could have a danger of releasing a lot of CO2 carbon into the atmosphere, which we don't want. We can see evidence of it this last few weeks with the world overeating, so we've got to, this is part of it, we've got to, this is a wrong area really to build on.
Thank you, Councillor Slack. Councillor G.
Yeah, is it possible for us to use Anne's reasons, because it's her generation we're trying to protect this land for, and I think she put it very succinctly, and it's all recorded in the meeting, and I'm sure officers can reach out and find some, and that was the nuance of it as far as I'm concerned. You know, we're here to protect our countryside for people like Anne.
Chair, procedurally it has to be the committee that has clear, concise reasons for refusal if they're minded to overturn the officer recommendation and refuse planning permission. Listening to the debate just now, a number of issues have come out. I understand that the concerns around the development not generating sufficient economic development as a reason for refusal on its own. I don't think that will stand up to scrutiny appeal. However, I've also heard the concerns about impact on character, appearance and tranquility of the area. So I think a reason for refusal that sets harm against benefits and basically says that it has not been demonstrated that the economic benefits of the scheme outweigh the harm to the character, appearance and tranquility of the area could be a valid reason for refusal. I'm afraid that impact on competition impact on neighbouring developments is quite simply not a planning consideration. It cannot lawfully be taken into account, and I'm sure my colleague, the legal advisor, can confirm that position. But I think that could form a legitimate reason for refusal. I've also heard concerns about the location of the site, and I think that the proposal due to its scale and remote location in relation to settlements and public transport not being sustainable development and contrary to S1, S4, EC9 and HC19 of the local plan, that would be a legitimate reason for refusal. I've also heard just now in the debate concerns about peat and the disturbance to the peat being a reason for refusal. My advice on that is that there is not, given the type of development this is, metal piles driven into the ground, actually the disturbance to the peat will be very minimal, and there is insufficient evidence in my view to say that there will be significant carbon emissions from the development. There might be some, I accept that, but it would have to be significant in order to be a defensible reason for refusal. There'd have to be some pretty hard evidence to demonstrate exactly how that was going to come about and how much and what the impact would be on the climate. So I'm afraid I don't see that as a strong one, but the others I've just tried to set out how I see them. So I think there are basically two reasons for refusal there, and the economic the economic balance gets linked to the overall harm to amenity, tranquility, changing character of the area.
Thank you for your response, Chris. It's Councillor Lees and then Councillor John Boynton.
Thank you, Chair. Chris has already alluded to what I was going to say, but I do think policy S1 should come into this as well. Sustainable development principles, which it doesn't meet. So policy S1 is another good one. And of course, highway safety for those people that are going to walk from this site as well down the narrow lanes and the, you know, it's not safe. Yes, we've got a decent entrance, but it's not safe for people to walk into Matlock or wherever they want to walk to. So highway safety is another issue that's a good reason for refusal. I'd like to come back again in debate further, Chair.
I mean, caution against highway safety. We've obviously got the Highways Authority representative with us this evening. The trouble with the highways issue in relation to the MPPF is that the MPPF sets out a very high threshold for harm to highways, making it very difficult to sustain reasons for refusal on highways grounds, particularly if the County Highway Authority are advising that there are no strong grounds to do that. So I would stick to the advice I've previously given. I think there are two reasons there. That could be a case can be made at appeal. I've not heard anything on any other topic, I'm afraid, to suggest that there would be another sustainable reason for refusal there.
I herewith care what Chris is saying. That's good advice. Councillor John Boynton.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points, really. I just want to put some balance on what seems to be the mood of the room. This development, if granted, would provide jobs, probably not the best jobs, but the people that get those jobs, I'm sure, would be grateful to get those jobs at this moment in time. Undoubtedly, it will contribute to the local economy to whatever degree. We don't know that, I accept that. I think my main point is there's 1,300 trees due to be cut down. It sounds a lot. But I think what we need to bear in mind that if this application isn't granted, then the remainder will come down. They'll be chopped down, used for firewood. Well, timber, firewood, they'll still be chopped down. Currently it's a plantation. By chopping the 1,300 down and installing this development, wildlife will be preserved because all the trees won't be coming down. And nature is very resilient to change. Cutting down the trees will result in disturbing the ground. And I've heard about carbon being released from the ground. I don't know the exact answer to this, but driving piles into the ground, digging the roots up or however they do it is still going to disturb the ground, which is the worst case scenario. I don't know, but I just thought I'd raise it. There's still a sizable area of woodland forest going to be left for residents to use. These huts will be within the woodland that's left. And I just think that we need to be careful what we wish for. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Boynton.
There's nobody else.
Councillor Dobbs and then Councillor Lee. That would like to speak, and then Councillor Hughes. Yeah. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. If I can bring David Ball into this. I found his papers. It's actually several on the portal, not just two. And the one that was sent round I thought was the least significant. It's the second one listed on the portal, which is really amazing. And I hope those people that have quoted him also noted on page 25 of that the three options that he suggests, because that's where we are. Continue with clear felling plans, option 1. Option 2, this application and manage or improve the remaining forest. Option 3, manage, improve the forest without cabins, etc. Now, okay, you're the Forestry England, Forestry Commission as was, or whatever they call themselves. This has to make money. You're going to make it by felling. Do you particularly bother with any issues that David Ball has outlined about what's happening to the infiltration? The problem is you've got a problem, or Matlock has a problem, as it stands. If I lived in Matlock and I was in an area where the springs might spring, as it were, and wanted some kind of reassurance that it wouldn't get worse, I'd like something done up here on Farley Moor, but there's no money to do that at all. The LFA have made it crystal clear that they would not address that problem, money for such things comes from developers. The only person that's actually suggested doing anything up there that could be made to address this problem, because as David Ball so eloquently suggests, it's not infiltration that is the solution to everything, although it's top of the NPPF ways of getting rid of surface water. Up there, it's the problem. Well, that's his claim. Because the eroded Chatsworth gritstone is more free-flowing than perhaps it might be expected to be. There's lots of statements made about the size of the aquifer. I'm not sure they're substantiated, but they're made. This is perhaps part of the problem, which indeed I'm very impressed by what friends of Farley Moor have done. But there's an awful lot that isn't quantitative. You criticise quite extensively Rose's report. There were some harsh words made, but equally, you can't say, oh, I don't believe you, I think this, without giving your precise justification of why you think that. You'll find that if you ever have seen any of these inquiries, and I've lived through two, and there's some people in this room have also, it's a very damaging experience as you hear people pulled to pieces because they cannot actually justify what they've claimed. That's where we are. What has to be put forward? I read the mood in the room, and it's clearly not the way my brain's going, but I read the mood in the room. You're going to have to be absolutely precise as to what you think will stand up at appeal, because that's undoubtedly, well, I'm guessing a bit, but I cannot see it not going to appeal. So please think carefully about what is best for Matlock. After all, we're not talking about the destruction or removal of any of the opportunities at Farley Wood. In that respect, one of the suggestions is actually simply not true and wouldn't stand up in appeal, because the amount of public access will be the same. You could argue that if you were in a wheelchair, it would be better. You could get there, you could unload the wheelchair and roll it around a little bit better than you can at the moment. So it is an interesting point. Planning is all about weighing relative harms and relative benefits. And we need to be absolutely clear that the relative harms win in this case if you're going to vote to refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lees, and then Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to come back on the update on the recommendation from the fire service, fire safety. As we all know around this table, I spent 30 years with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service, fighting many a blaze in woodlands, etc., and forestry situations. And I think this is a disaster waiting to happen. One way in, one way out. A water tank sat underground that you may never be able to get to because of a fire situation. You're encouraging electric vehicles, electric bike charging points, that if you look on the news, there's fires on a regular basis. We're looking at bringing vehicles into the forest, eat from exhausts, eat from the engines, and then to top it all, you go and put log burners in them. And it's a disaster waiting to happen, I'm afraid. And I hope in 10 years' time you can sit in this room and prove me wrong, but I just see it as a disaster waiting to happen, and I can't support it.
Councillor Hughes, is there anyone else that would like to speak in the... Okay.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it's just if we do make this report, then not a reason for refusal, but an observation is the concern about the sewage pipe and the need to ensure that that sewage pipe is provided, so that, because to avoid contaminating the groundwater supply. So if it does go to planning appeal, the planning inspector understands that that is a concern of the committee.
That can be picked up in an informative. Yeah.
Councillor Shelley.
Gareth, I think you get a chance to come in as the proposer
You
speak.
can wind up, Gareth, in a little while. Councillor Shelley, then Councillor Butcher. Thank you.
We've just had an example sorry, Councillor Lees, of something which can be conditioned. So we've had on the table tonight, introduced at the last minute, this addition of a condition relating to fire safety. So that's an example of something where the development can't go ahead, it says here, until that particular issue has been suitably addressed. And this is where we find ourselves in a difficult position as councillors if we are going to be in an appeal after this. I look around the room now and I ask everyone here, who, and there may well be people here, but who has got the time and money and conviction that they've got the evidence to be able, as Councillor Dobbs has said, to stand up effectively in a court and say this is absolutely true and we have no doubt about it and we will win this argument, because that's what it will come down to. And that's why it's often good to go for narrow reasons for refusal where you're convinced. So I would stick to the two that we've mentioned, which are, I believe, EC9D, and I think there's a suggestion, and I bow to Chris's professional judgment here, around amenity change of use and remoteness of location, and I think that was something in the area of HC19, wasn't it? I think you were looking at there. But this is where, as lay members, we rely on the professionalism of our officers to make sure that we stand a fighting chance at what is likely to be the next stage.
Thank you, Roger.
I'd just like to, again, having said all that, I feel, as a Darleydale ward member, I feel the pain of everybody here. I know what you've been through. I know what it's like to wade through all of these pages and documents with the uncertainty that this may go on for years and years. But I'm just saying that this probably isn't, unfortunately, the end of the matter.
Okay, Councillor Butcher, then if no one else, I'll let you wind up, Gareth. So, put it to the test. Go on, Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard the debate, and to be honest, I'm not convinced by the arguments that they outweigh the officers' judgment, who are more the experts than we are councillors round the room. The arguments about public transport in particular, I can see the point, but the officers had a fairly clear judgment on that. The one thing I am unnerved by is the fact that there hasn't been sufficient engagement, it feels to me, in my opinion, with the pressure group. And if I had a free choice of how the decision would go tonight, it would be to defer, to allow the officers to engage with the pressure group, to hear their arguments, to make the case as to why it is or it isn't a justified proposal, and then to either amend their report or to come back explaining the situation. The other thing I would say is that Peter Dobbs's points haven't been given sufficient consideration in the discussion. I think they're very powerful, and I'd like the action group to consider, if we rejected this and it was left then with the Forestry England having to look after the land without any input of income to help manage it, then the consequence may be rather worse than enabling that plot to go ahead. So I think there are some complex things that haven't been fully explored, and I would prefer that we defer and then allow the engagement with the action group and then come back with a
well, let's test the motion, Bob. If it falls, then I hear what you're saying. So, Councillor G, you were the mover. You have the right to wind up, please.
Yeah, so in summary of, obviously I'd like to propose that we refuse the application. I believe that we have had sufficient public engagement, because I've listened to a lot of public tonight. I've listened to it. I think the loss of the tranquility, as Chris puts forward, the loss of the status quo as it is at the now, so we don't change it, so we leave it for the residents how they want it to be. So I'd like to propose that we refuse the application, and I'd like to ask for us. Well, I've got a seconder already, I think. To the vote, please.
Thank you, Councillor G. Lees, sorry, it's the heat.
Chair, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Does that find a seconder? Is that? No, I'm sorry, Peter, no. If it falls, then... Now, Chris just wants to go through with us the two reasons to clarify before we take the vote. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the sake of clarity, because this will be scrutinised in the future. There's been a few more comments made just in the last few minutes, but I think I want to make sure officers do the right thing if indeed the application is refused tonight, that we are capturing the will of the committee correctly. So my understanding is that there are two reasons for refusal on the table. One is the proposal by reason of its scale and remote location in relation to settlements and public transport does not constitute sustainable development. It's therefore contrary to policies S1, S4, EC9 and HC19 of the local plan. And the other is that the economic benefits arising from the development would not outweigh the harm that would arise from the development in relation to impact on character, appearance and tranquility of the area, contrary to policies EC9, PD1 and PD5, and one could also include paragraph 88 of the National Planning Policy Framework. I think that captures the two key reasons for refusal that's come out of the debate. I know other matters have been raised, but I want to make sure that if the motion is agreed, that officers put on the correct reasons for refusal.
So just before we take the vote, I want, in my capacity then as chair, in my normal way, to express what I feel. Now, contrary to what a lot of people say to me about we're a waste of space, I think we're very committed, and I want to compliment my local town council. There's been quite a few members of the Darley-Dale Town Council here tonight, and it's a question of the community using the framework, and I know they've spent endless hours, endless time listening, and certainly the list of reasons, Councillor Farmer, that the Darley-Dale Town Council came up with, there's certainly things in there that I personally feel justify a refusal. So really what I'm saying to you is, from my perspective, it has been a very, very long meeting, but it's been a long meeting because, as I said at the beginning, it was important to listen to you. We're reaching now our own conclusions, and this is democracy in action. So we'll take a vote, please. All those in favour of refusing...
Recorded vote, Chair.
It's a recorded vote. So, yeah. It was seconded by Councillor Dermot Murphy. Yes. Yes. Yeah, no, that's a very fair point because it can be confusing. Yes, you're absolutely right. So you're either for the recommendation of refusal or against it. John?
So the recorded vote for agenda item 4.1. Councillor John Boynton? Against. Councillor David Burton?
For.
Councillor Bob Butcher?
Against.
Councillor Peter Dobbs?
Against.
Councillor Gareth G? For. Councillor David Hughes? For. Councillor Stuart Lees?
For.
Councillor Laura Melstrom?
For.
Councillor Dermot Murphy?
For.
Councillor Roger Shelley?
For.
And Councillor Peter Slack?
For.
So, on concluding the meeting, I'm pleased to say the motion has been carried and that the committee has recommended refusal.
Overturns those appeals. Almost the same points we mentioned.
We do.